Greetings comic lovers, and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old, to history, to anecdotes, to really wherever the whim takes us. And today it's straight into old comics. Well, old-ish. The 90s can be considered old now, so if you were born then, like me, feel old. Today we're only going back to the millennium though. We're going to be discussing one of my favorite character traits ever that sadly is nowhere near as prominent as it was back in these glory days. Not that all of these were glory days, but this character's trait, it was its glory day. You get what I'm trying to say. The trait that we're going to be taking a look at is the fact that Martian Manhunter loves cookies. Specifically Chocos, which are just Oreos, but they had to change the name after they got a cease and desist because Oreos are trademarked. So all of a sudden, in the middle of issues, just with no explanation, Oreos just become Chocos. But we all know what happened. If you love Chocos, hit that like button. One of the fun things about all the different characters out there is that you get the opportunity to learn their little quirks and traits. And for the Martian Manhunter, aka John Jones, this includes his cookie love. Focus on this began in earnest during his run on the Justice League International, or the JLI, a more comedic Justice League team, whose first run launched in 1989 and created some characterizations still known by many as the default today. This goes particularly for Guy Gardner and Booster Gold, though that is changing a bit with Booster of late. The JLI books were meant to have a more fun tone, even if serious things did happen. So in these books, the characters had a lot more quirks than most. These are the issues that feature the famous One Punch, where Batman knocks out Guy Gardner with one punch, which is what is being referenced later on when Hal Jordan knocks out Batman with one punch during Rebirth, for those who read all of these things. The whole thing made this book feel very domestic, which appealed to its fans, and it gave the world the iconic friendship and just-ship between the Blue Beetle Ted Kord, who I'm naming because there are 3 Blue Beetles, and Booster Gold. 3 at the time of this recording, I should say. There can be more. But back to the cookies. My favorite Martian Manhunter cookie story actually doesn't come from the JLI. It comes from the Martian Manhunter solo series that began in 1998, specifically Martian Manhunter number 24, which was released in the year 2000. See? The world didn't end, it gave us glorious comics. This story is a one-shot, meaning that it's a self-contained story, and it's set in a nebulous time period in the JLI, and John is telling it to the current iteration of the Justice League, well, the then current iteration. John is telling this team about the day he lost his cookies, but the most important thing is that this issue is titled Double Stuff, so you know you're in for a good time. Look at this cover. Just look in it. Bask in it. Love it. It's behind me too. This issue begins without melodramatic narration, and instead hops right into John going to look for some Chocos, while Booster and Beetle tell the others assembled, who consist of Fire, Ice, and Guy Gardner, that they have an epic prank in store. They stole John's cookies. From the start, it's clear that the loss of his cookies is a bit too much for John, but he's trying to keep it together. The gang goes along with it, and all seems well until, while misusing Justice League equipment to spy on John as he goes to stores around town trying to find Chocos, Booster and Beetle actually had the commitment level to go around and buy out all the Chocos from all the stores in town. So while they're spying to see how their epic "it's just a prank bro" is going down, they notice that he's beginning to lose control over his human form. That's when they realize that something is actually very wrong. Eventually, the Martian Manhunter literally hulks out. He turns into a creature that is just the Hulk if the Hulk was a crazed cookie monster.
Mars needs Chocos. You steal John's cookies. You not John's friends. John Crush. Yes, this is my Hulk voice. The Hulk's not very menacing.
I too have felt this way when someone has taken the last cookie. This comic speaks to me. Now, some of the jokes in this comic are generic, like the cookies or the Hulk references, but others are specific to the JLI, and for those ones, well, they of course work better if you have a history with those books. Such as the jokes with Maxwell Lord, who is very different in comics than any live-action adaptation to date. I still don't know what Supergirl was doing. The panel of his nose exploding with blood like an anime character as he tries to exert mental control over the UN members he's having a meeting with to make sure they don't notice Choco Hulk smashing all their windows is gold. It's less gold if you have no idea who he is though. Eventually, Booster and Beetle manage to lead John to the stash, and he eats cookies until he reverts back into his usual form. Realizing that there's obviously a problem, Max has Batman run some tests, and it turns out that the chemical components in Chocos act as a narcotic in Martians. He is literally addicted to cookies, which leads to one of my favorite Batman lines of all time. You're a junkie, a Chocos junkie. It's just imagining it being said in the Kevin Conroy voice. It's so good. Eventually, John realizes that they're right, but being a Martian, he can skip all the rehab, and instead he forces all of the addiction out of his body in a cohesive form, and it turns into an evil, craving monster that then goes around attaching itself to all the others in the room, revealing their inner desires, except for Booster and Beetle, who take notes. Admittedly, this scene fell flat for me. All of the other addictions seemed forced to me, but I'm over here laughing about cookies and John being a cookie-holic. So who am I to talk? The issue then cuts to the present with a very confused Kyle Rayner, the then Green Lantern, wondering just what exactly he was supposed to get out of this. John tells him it's that anything can be an addiction. Drugs, sex, cookies, or power. Then he proceeds to bash Hal Jordan. Okay. Cliff notes about what was going on with Hal Jordan in this time period, because at the time of this recording, Hal Jordan is just alive in the Green Lantern again. That was not always the case. In this period in history, Hal was still the Spectre after he had killed the Green Lantern Corps and Sinestro using the DC method of, you guessed it, neck snap, after Coast City was destroyed. This was all retconned to not really being his fault because he was possessed. Some say he was still in control of his actions, others say no, completely warped. But that latter part is all discussion for another day. Kyle leaves, having not benefited from that story at all, and Wonder Woman pulls John aside to tease him and say that she was on the Justice League at that time and she doesn't remember any of that happening. And John tells her that it doesn't matter, it's a good story either way, and then proceeds to ask her for a cookie. So, did this really happen? I like to believe it did, but like John said, if it didn't, it's still a good story. Of course, it's a humor story and a filler issue, so mileage varies. This will be too silly for some people's blood for sure, and that's fine. Different strokes for different folks. But now you know that the Martian Manhunter loves Chocos, and that he once potentially went on a rampage because of it. He's a Chocos junkie. What's your favorite random issue? It doesn't have to be a one-shot. Just share down below. I want to hear about them. I may not have read them, and I'm always excited to read new things. Thanks so much for watching Casually Comics. Please do all of the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. I'm Sasha, and we'll see you all here again soon. Bye-bye.